I knew something was off the moment I heard Delilah's laughter echoing down the hall, too bright, too victorious for a random Tuesday morning. I paused, fingers hovering above my keyboard, where a block of tangled code had just started to make sense. Her laugh didn't belong here, not this early, not in this house, not slicing through the quiet I'd carefully preserved. I glanced toward the doorway, hoping it had just been my imagination, but the heavy footfalls and the tap of high heels confirmed otherwise. Delilah was home. The hallway outside my room, the one I still half thought of as Grandpa's old study, buzzed with voices. Evelyn's, crisp and honeyed like always, carried through the walls. It's the perfect space, honey. Closer to the router, lots of light. I stood slowly, pushing the chair back with a sigh. From the open window, I could see a few stubborn maple leaves still clinging to branches. November in Lexington had always been golden, but today it just felt gray. I opened the door before they could knock. Evelyn smiled without warmth. "Celeste," she said, "Delilah needs the room." Delilah peered past her, her perfect brows raised in mock surprise. "Hi, Cece. Didn't know you were still working from here." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Evelyn continued, stepping aside to let Delilah in, uninvited. With Delilah launching her consulting brand, she needs a professional setup. You understand, right? You're resourceful. The garage has great space, and we've already had it cleared out. I blinked. The garage? It's temporary, Douglas's voice boomed as he entered from the stairs. He didn't even pretend to be apologetic. You've had a good run in here, but it's time you started thinking seriously about the future, like your sister. Delilah shot me an insincere smile, her fresh manicure catching the morning light. Thanks for being flexible, Cece. My name sounded sour in her mouth. I didn't argue. I looked around the room, my room. Charts and sketches papered the walls. My grandfather's old desk, still bearing the dent from where he once dropped a typewriter, sat in the corner under a lamp I'd rewired myself. This space wasn't just where I worked. It was where I rebuilt myself, but none of them saw that. They never had. I nodded once, tightly. Sure, the garage. They left satisfied, their voices already trailing off to other subjects. Paint colors, a delivery schedule. What shade of beige said modern ambition. Packing didn't take long. Years of being overlooked had taught me to travel light, even in my own home. I boxed up my monitors, tucked my notebooks into a milk crate, and slipped the small framed photo of Grandpa from the bookshelf into my coat pocket. By the time I reached the bottom step, I was already out the door. The cold slapped me awake as I crossed the driveway. I could have cried, but it didn't feel worth the effort. Instead, I walked 3 blocks down to Charlie's diner. The bell above the door gave its familiar jingle, and Charlie looked up from the counter. "You look like you've seen better days, kid," he said, sliding a mug toward me. "Yeah," I said. "That obvious." He chuckled and poured the coffee. "You want the usual?" I nodded, took it black, and left a 5 on the counter. Back at the house, I unlocked the garage. The smell of old paint, insulation, and dust greeted me like an old dog. Most of the junk was gone, like they'd said, but not all. An old workbench lined one wall. One bare bulb hung from the ceiling like a jury-rigged star. There was no heat, no carpet. The floor was rough cement, scattered with stray screws and splinters. I set up anyway. By dusk, the monitors were in place, humming faintly. My laptop glowed with a familiar blue light. I taped Grandpa's postcard to the wall above the keyboard, the one he sent me the summer before he passed. "Always carve your own path, kiddo," it said in his looping scrawl. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I opened the private terminal. My fingers moved almost automatically. The code I typed had lived in me for 3 years. It was the blueprint of my days and the shape of every sleepless night. Zephyr Technologies had started in silence, and it would rise the same way. I typed the first command. Initiate Ember Protocol Phase 1. The screen blinked. A soft whir from the external drive confirmed receipt. A message from Marcus popped up on her screen. System lock acquired. Phase 2, ready when you are. It started drizzling the moment I touched the first cardboard box. Lexington weather had a flair for irony. I pulled the hood of my sweatshirt tighter over my head, balancing a milk crate full of cables and notebooks against my hip. The walk from the back door to the garage wasn't far, but the cold had a way of finding the gaps in everything: coats, plans, even people. By the time I slid the crate onto the dusty workbench, my sleeves were damp and my fingers stiff. The garage smelled like old wood and disuse. I hadn't realized how much I missed the quiet hum of my room upstairs until it was replaced by the drip of rainwater hitting a metal bucket someone had forgotten to move. I went back for another load and spotted movement across the street. Walter Granger, hunched against the wind, was out front again, this time wrestling with a tangle of branches that had fallen across his walkway. He was older than my dad by at least 2 decades, with a spine that leaned left and a knee that clicked audibly when he walked. But he insisted on doing everything himself. I dropped the box by the door and jogged over. "Mr. Granger, let me give you a hand," I said, already grabbing one of the larger limbs. He looked up, rain pooling in the folds of his worn green parka. "That so?" he said, squinting, like he wasn't sure whether to be offended or grateful. "You got a spare spine to lend too?" "I've got gloves and stubbornness. Close enough?" He barked a laugh and stepped aside. We cleared the walkway in silence. I couldn't tell if he liked that or just didn't have energy for conversation. His hands shook when he tried to fold up the old metal rake, so I took it gently and leaned it against his porch rail. "Lights out again," I noted, pointing to the overhead bulb. "Been meaning to fix that. Damn ladder hates me." "Let me try?" 5 minutes later, I'd swapped out the bulb and rewired a loose connection with a bit of tape I always kept in my back pocket. The porch lit up like a welcome sign. Walter stared up at it like it had performed a miracle. "Hold on," he said, disappearing into the house. When he came back, he held a thin cardboard folder and a small foil-wrapped parcel. "Pie's apple from the farmer's market. Folders, well, you'll see. You really don't have to—" He waved a hand. "You helped. No reason good enough. That's reason enough." I thanked him and walked back across the street, cradling both gifts like they might break. The pie went on the counter next to the coffee maker I'd just reassembled. The folder, though, that went straight to the desk. The label was faded, typed on an old machine. Langston Holdings, internal, archived. I sat, opened it slowly. The first few pages were just organizational charts, outdated logos, a few compliance forms, but then I found it. A directory listing of discretionary accounts marked trust linked with handwritten notes. I snapped a picture and sent it to Marcus. Seconds later, he pinged me back. "Is this a prank?" "Nope," I typed. "Walter Granger said it might be useful." "Useful? This is gold-plated. This is the key." The rain picked up outside, tapping against the garage window, like fingers drumming on glass. I leaned back in the chair, letting the data settle in. These weren't just trust accounts. They were shells, places to move money unseen, untraced, or so they thought. I flipped to the last page, a signature at the bottom, Douglas Holloway. My chest tightened. Marcus replied again, this time with a screenshot of a system match. One of the account numbers aligned with a flag transfer we'd isolated weeks ago, only now we had provenance. Marcus replies, "If this is legit, we've got them." From the outside, the garage still looked like a tool shed, but inside, it was humming like the 47th floor of a fintech tower. The air smelled like old drywall and warm circuitry. I had pushed the workbench under the smallest window, stacked 2 monitors on old crates, and looped Ethernet through a hole I'd drilled in the back wall. A space heater rattled in the corner, and the only light came from my screens and a weathered desk lamp I'd wired myself. Everything buzzed, softly but steadily. Code running, fans cooling, systems learning. Duke Ellington's trumpet whispered through the garage from the little radio perched on a shelf above my head. Grandpa used to put it on every time we worked on the sprinkler system chim together. "Genius needs rhythm," he'd say, half joking, handing me a wrench with one hand and a slice of cold apple pie with the other. Tonight it wasn't the genius I needed, it was precision. Zephyr Pulse was in its final diagnostic pass, neural learning layers running hot, trust score models recalibrating in real time. Marcus had already sent over the final compliance sandbox, his notes full of exclamation points and way too many emojis for a grown man. I was just finishing my third test of a trade path when the knock came. Evelyn, again. I didn't get up, I just waited. The door creaked open. Delilah's dinner is tomorrow night, she said casually, stepping halfway into the space. It's at Bellamy's. We already have the reservation. You should dress appropriately. I turned just slightly, enough to meet her eyes. I mean neutral, she added, voice tight. No strange jackets, maybe something soft, not too masculine. She glanced at the garage setup behind me, cables looping like vines, monitors flickering with data sets and stock simulation timelines. She didn't ask what any of it was. When she left, I waited 10 full seconds before breathing out. I turned the jazz down. The horn softened to the background. Then I opened the folder, Final Launch. The code stared back, neat as a ledger, steady as breath. I clicked into the Zephyr Pulse execution suite, 3 tabs for U.S. markets, 1 for internal audit triggers. Langston Holdings showed up under Controlled Acquisitions, blinking yellow. 12 hours from now, that would turn green. I thought about what Grandpa might have said, seeing it all. Probably something gruff like, "Don't let them know you're smarter until it's too late." Or maybe just, "Good work, kiddo." I typed in the final commands, one line after another. Load AI model, ZPR Core Next 3, run recursive integrity scan, merge offshore transfer logs. Each one completed without a glitch. Then came the last line, deploy protocol Tiger, audit mode. The interface flickered, the little tiger icon lit up in the corner, a joke from Marcus, who once said the market moved like a jungle and we needed claws. I'd left it in. It felt right. For a second, the system hesitated. Then the dashboard unfolded like a blooming map. Lines traced across the screen, data jumping between nodes, connections lighting up red, orange, gold. Langston's structures had never been built to survive transparency. That was their flaw, and my advantage. The alert blinked silently near the bottom of the screen, soft and clinical. A terminal alert blinks. System ownership pending transfer, T-minus 12 hours. Bellamy's was the kind of place where your wine glass sparkled more than your conversation, and tonight it was all about Delilah. The maitre d' greeted me with a polite smile that faltered for just a second before it turned warm. "Welcome back, Miss Holloway," he said softly, as if he remembered more than he let on. I gave him a nod and followed him across the glowing parquet floors, passing tables where crystal clinked over candlelight and diners laughed in soft, curated tones. Thanksgiving Eve at Bellamy's was a tradition for some in Lexington's social circle, my family included. This year it was a celebration dinner for Delilah's latest endeavor, her consulting empire, as Evelyn called it. Their table sat near the windows where downtown lights shimmered against the glass like confetti. Delilah was mid-sentence, gesturing with her wine glass, when she spotted me. Her smile flickered. "Celeste, you made it." Douglas didn't even look up. "We ordered already." I slid into the seat at the far end, opposite the windows, beneath the wreath of gold leaves Bellamy's hung every November. "No problem," I said. The waiter appeared almost immediately. "Still the ginger pear mocktail, Miss Holloway?" I nodded. He didn't ask how I knew him. I didn't tell him this was where Grandpa had brought me for my 16th birthday when no one else remembered. Delilah was talking again about her branding firm, about pivot strategies, about how her mentor at Wharton said she had executive presence. Evelyn beamed. Douglas added in something about a friend who had promised to send over a few clients. They didn't ask what I'd been working on. I let them talk. I sipped my drink. I watched Evelyn's fingers dance along the gold trim of the menu and listened to Delilah's practiced laugh. And I waited. Dinner came and went in courses: duck confit, autumn squash risotto, cranberry tarts too pretty to eat. I ate in silence, Bernard refilling my water glass every time it dropped an inch. Then Evelyn leaned back and said, "We'll take another bottle of the Pinot. It's a celebration after all." She reached for her purse. The waiter returned a moment later, his voice soft but tight. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card was declined. Evelyn blinked. That's not possible. Try again. I did, 3 times. Douglas frowned, already pulling out his own wallet. Here, try mine. The waiter took it, disappeared, and returned moments later with the same apologetic expression. I'm very sorry, sir. This one has also been declined. Delilah gave a little laugh, trying to smooth over the awkwardness. I'm sure it's just a glitch or something. I set my fork down gently. No, I said, it's not. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a sleek black card with a small, discreet Zephyr insignia in the corner. I placed it beside my plate. Dinner's on me, I said. Technically, it always was. There was a beat of stunned silence. The waiter picked up the card like it was made of glass. Douglas stared at me, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? Langston doesn't answer to you anymore. My coffee had gone cold, untouched, beside the blinking screen. Langston's digital skeletons had no end. The cinnamon steam that had curled from the mug an hour ago was long gone, replaced by the hum of fan-cooled processors and the sharp light of audit logs cascading down my monitors. The garage, for all its creaks and chill, had never felt more alive. I sat wrapped in an old quilt, one my grandfather used to keep in his den. The edges were frayed, the colors faded, but it still smelled faintly of cedar and pipe smoke. My hands moved steadily over the keyboard, dragging, highlighting, cross-referencing transaction IDs that once lived in the shadows. They couldn't hide anymore. Marcus was live on video from his apartment in Atlanta, surrounded by screens of his own. He rubbed his eyes and squinted at a shared chart I'd just uploaded. You're sure these are connected to the discretionary trust? I nodded. Walter's documents confirm it. Same shell entity, same routing numbers. They built it with layers, but they didn't count on someone reverse engineering the logic behind the transfers. Damn, he muttered. I almost feel bad for them. I didn't. I clicked another window. Zephyr Pulse was doing what it was built to do: detect, trace, and isolate. The algorithm I'd written, fine-tuned on 3 years of sleepless nights and takeout noodles, was mapping Langston Holdings' shadow economy in real time. For every philanthropic fund and offshore endowment, there was a matching expense that led back to Douglas's name. I opened a new folder and started organizing the findings for export. My phone buzzed. Evelyn, can we talk? A minute later, Evelyn. Please, another buzz. Evelyn. I didn't know everything. I stared at the messages without touching the screen. Instead, I turned up the jazz on the radio just slightly. The trumpet soothed the sharp edges of the moment. Then came the call I'd been expecting. Celeste. Walter's voice rumbled through the speaker, warm and gravelly. Are you busy? Only with takedown protocol. Nothing major. He chuckled. I always liked your sense of humor. Reminds me of your grandfather. He'd be damn proud, you know. I felt something in my chest tighten, then release. I just got off the phone with someone at the SEC, he continued. Apparently your little operation triggered a flag on at least 3 accounts, discretionary, hidden, possibly criminal. We built Zephyr Pulse for this. I know, he said, but this is personal. I didn't deny it. He was quiet for a second, then added, funny thing, back in '85, I filed an internal complaint about a similar structure, buried in red tape. HR said I was too meticulous. Looks like meticulous wins in the end. That it does. Outside the window, the street was quiet. A few porch lights twinkled through the bare trees. Somewhere, a wind chime rang against the early winter breeze. I finished packaging the files and sent them to our legal counsel. Zephyr's legal department didn't sleep, especially not tonight. My phone buzzed again. Evelyn. I let it sit. On the corner of the desk, Grandpa's notebook was open to the final page. His looping handwriting read, Build what matters, even if no one sees it coming. I closed the book and turned back to the screen. The system ran its final checksum. Transfer confirmed. Langston's accounts were now flagged, pending full investigation. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I didn't need to press anything else. The work was done. Walter's voice returned, softer now. Feels good, doesn't it? Not the power, the peace. Bellamy's again. Same soft jazz, same corner table, but everything feels different now. It was a week after Thanksgiving. Snow flurries drifted lazily outside the tall windows, catching in the wreaths that lined the street lamps. The morning crowd was quieter than usual, just a few regulars, bundled in wool coats, murmuring over cranberry scones and steaming mugs. I sat by the window, the same window that had framed my family's celebration a week ago, though none of them had noticed me then. They had been too busy lifting glasses, too busy talking about Delilah's future, their credit cards still warm from the swap. Today, the same sunlight spilled across the tablecloth. The difference was it belonged to me now. Bernard approached with a familiar smile and a linen napkin draped across his arm. "Your usual table, Miss Holloway?" "Yes," I said, folding my gloves into my lap. "Thank you, Bernard." He returned moments later with a black coffee, no cream, and a warm scone with just the right amount of sugar dusted on top. "Shall I bring the paper?" "No need," I said. "I've already seen the headlines." He gave a knowing smile and left me to it. I took a slow sip, letting the warmth settle in my hands. My phone buzzed quietly beside my saucer. "Marcus, Zephyr's live on NASDAQ. It's official. You're public." I didn't reply right away. I just sat back and listened to the piano near the bar, the soft clink of flatware against porcelain. The world didn't feel louder or grander. It felt quieter, clearer. The door opened and a gust of cold air followed someone in. Walter. He wore the same coat as always, patched at the elbows, and carried a plain brown box under one arm. His steps were slower this week, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "You didn't think I'd miss brunch, did you?" he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Not for a second." He placed the box on the table and pulled out a small pie tin wrapped in foil. "Can't let a banker go unfed." I laughed softly. "You brought pie to Bellamy's?" "They're lucky I didn't bring thermoses." He grinned. We sat in easy silence for a while, sipping coffee, watching Lexington wake up through the window. People passed by in scarves and boots, some with grocery bags, others with dogs in tow. No one recognized me. No one stared. And that, strangely, felt like the greatest gift. Walter leaned back in his chair, his fingers curled around the handle of his mug. "You didn't just take over a bank," he said. "You corrected a legacy." I didn't answer right away. I looked toward the table where my family had sat, where they'd laughed and ignored and toasted everything except me. The table was empty now. Maybe it always has been. "I didn't want revenge," I said. "I just wanted them to see me." Bernard returned, this time without prompting, and refreshed our drinks. "Your grandfather would have been proud," he said gently, folding a fresh napkin by my plate. "I still remember when he brought you here. You wore sneakers with a dress." "I remember," I said, smiling. "He told me that day I didn't need to fit in to stand out." I looked down at my phone one last time. The ticker showed Zephyr surging, green arrows, rising numbers, headlines full of my name. But that wasn't what made me proud. I looked at Walter, at the pie, at the snow dusting the sidewalk outside. I wasn't the golden child, I was the quiet one, and I built the gold. There's something quietly powerful about sitting in the same chair where they once overlooked you and realizing you no longer need their validation. I never raised her voice, never forced their attention, but I let my strength of character and my wisdom of action speak for themselves. Kindness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives as a helping hand across the street or a second chance given without conditions. And in those moments, it rewrites everything we thought we knew. If this story stirred something in you, maybe take a moment to look a little closer at the people around you, especially the ones others tend to dismiss. You might just find they're building something golden, quietly,